Magic, dungeons, waifus. These were the ingredients chosen to create the perfect fantasy series, but the creator accidentally added a fourth ingredient to the concoction: an herbivore protagonist. And thus was born a mid-fantasy anime! I have watched quite a bit of anime over this past spring season, and none of them have quite reached the levels of apathy that I feel towards I left my A rank party to help my former students reach the dungeon depths. Look, I know a lot of y'all are probably excited to see some coverage of the summer anime, and we're probably expecting me to start covering summer anime as well, like Lord of the Mystery, Takapi's Original Sin, and all of that jazz. But I figure I want summer to run for a few weeks before I actually start to talk about its anime, especially since I have a few more thoughts to wrap up about spring. Basically, I don't feel like judging an anime right off the bat off of its first episode, so I'm going to give it at least the 3-episode rule before I start making videos on it. In the meantime, you can enjoy my harping on the latest rendition of I'm secretly overpowered, but my tarred coworkers don't realize it and fire me before crashing and burning. A Rank Party is the story of a mage named Yuke Feldio, because apparently a basic name like Luke just doesn't sound fantasy enough. And Yuke was actually a part of a very high-ranking party that totally mistreated him for no other reason than they're dumb assholes, and Yuke was basically a doormat. If this sounds familiar, that's probably because you've watched an anime in the last couple of seasons, as this story has unfolded several times over the past 4 anime seasons. It's not exactly original. I expect this kind of behavior from the isekai genre, but not from fantasy. I'm kind of getting tired of this, okay? So Yuke is the one who does all of the tedious little tasks for his group. He manages their equipment, he manages their inventory, and he even manages the other members themselves in battle by constantly using his specialty support magic on them. Of course, they all just forget this at some point, and when he decides to leave the group due to being poorly compensated for all his efforts, they basically just tell him good riddance, we don't fucking need you anyway. But that's okay, because Yuke's backup plan is going to hook up with a party of all female former students of his who all conveniently happen to have a crush on him after he instructed them so that they can go delve into dungeons together. Yeah, he's definitely delving into dungeons. That's the thing he's going to explore. Right. So is this anime any good? Well, yes, actually. And then no. If you want to maximize your enjoyment out of this series, watch the first 9 episodes up to the end of Yuke's final confrontation with Thunderpike. That's effectively where this story peaks with its character writing, storytelling, and intrigue. After that, it is a long, slow, insufferable slide downhill into mediocrity. The story starts with Yuke and his dollar store Mushoku Tensei harem taking on a couple of low difficulty quests to gauge his new party's abilities. You see, Yuke has this dream of delving all the way to the bottom of a dungeon called Achromatic Darkness. We'll ignore the redundancy, because that's what his uncle had done at one point in his life to save the world. And if he wants to do that, he's going to need a damn good team to pull it off. Of course, while Yuke is basically grinding out levels with his harem, Thunderpike, Yuke's former party, headed by his childhood friend Simon, start to suffer big time because they're actually kinda mid without Yuke. Okay, so here's where the series peaked for me. Simon starts to get desperate when he realizes that his party isn't getting anywhere without their pocket mercy Yuke, so he starts trying to recruit Yuke again, but gets rejected at literally every turn. In the end, he strikes a deal with a fat loser stalker of the Clover girls, Clover being Yuke's new party, and they decide to try and force Yuke into submission and turn the girls into slaves. But something goes sideways, the dungeon collapses, and a member of Thunderpike who happened to still be somewhat on good terms with Yuke comes to their rescue. Clover is able to escape in the chaos, leaving Thunderpike stranded deep in a dungeon, but also being forced to abandon their savior Jamie to her fate. The grand finale of all this is that they dive back into the dungeon to save Jamie, only to be confronted with an immortal Simon who basically decided to turn himself undead in order to get himself out of a bind that he was in. And in the final battle, Yuke curses his former friend to the life of a Discord mod. Well, close enough. Simon becomes an eternally regenerating lump of grotesque flesh who would never see the light of day again. Spoiler alert, he returns later as a golden testicle threatening to end the world. And that's basically the last time the writing of the series was really good, in my estimation. Almost all of the cool shit happens in the first part of the story that we just discussed. We're introduced to the concept of the dungeons being links to other worlds, in the multiverse, and also passages into the realms of gods. Yuke even encounters one of said gods and is able to broker a deal whereby him and his party are spared death in that instance. We also learn that there is always a threat from dungeons, that the parallel world could overlap theirs and erase it from existence. Yuke's complicated feelings and his moving on from his old party was actually a compelling story, as he genuinely saw Simon as a friend for the longest time, even in spite of some of the ways that he had been treated. From those first 9 episodes, I was getting more and more invested into the story as time went on. But after the ultimate downfall of Thunderpike, the series began to basically rerun the same arc over and over again. Some crazy thing would happen in a dungeon. Yuke and the Girls of Clover would be sent in for no reason to investigate it, because, well, apparently everyone trusts them now. I don't know why. Oh no! The end of the world is approaching! Yuke and crew defeat the apocalypse. Then repeat. Glad Sheim and the Royal Mausoleum were basically the same arc, and neither of them really presented anything substantive to the story that made it feel like a satisfying narrative the way the first third of the series did. The characters in this series, outside of that, largely ended up feeling like versions of Mushoku Tensei characters who'd had their entire personalities ripped out and been replaced by something that centered entirely around their infatuation with Yuke. Perhaps this does come down to the directing and the way it seemed to push Roxy McGurty, Rain, as the main girl. But the others were honestly pretty flat and boring characters with no level of depth to them and no real intriguing qualities. The best out of the bunch really ends up being the aforementioned Rain and Jamie, who each have some level of character exploration around them, with Rain's past and Jamie's guilt over not helping Yuke sooner, providing us some sort of insight into what makes these two who they are. But Timu Eris and Great Value Sylphie don't exactly get the same treatment. In fact, they feel largely sidelined in all of this. And on top of that, the harem is constantly topped off with new girls who are either too young for most people's tastes, or who are only in the running because the author said bigger is better, I guess, and tossed in a couple of bland characters to tick some boxes and maybe have one of them die at some point without much consequence to the story. And amid all the love and attention Yuke gets from the girls that are very obviously one step away from spreading their legs for him so he can explore their dungeon depths, he remains as dense as a neutron star and as detached from all the potential romance as you would expect any mid-harem protagonist to be. For as much as he is bludgeoned with the romantic interest sledgehammer that this show wields, he seems particularly opposed to engaging in even the mere act of kissing in most cases. And the one time where it does actually seem like it's going to get up to some harem stuff, it does it all off screen. Of fucking course it does. But hey, from a practical standpoint, I will give it this. If you spent all your time raiding these girls' dungeons, well, I don't think you'd ever be able to get any work done. But hey, at least the story ends after Yuke saves the world, right? Right? They don't decide to drag this on past stopping the apocalypse, right? The climax of this first season, and yes, this is only the first season because it's apparently been slated for another, was Yuke killing the literal apocalypse. Don't ask how that works. I don't know much about what's going on here. All I know is that you really can't up the stakes much more than that, can you? So the series had some shining moments, for sure, but it overall wasn't exactly a stellar anime. If I had to put a number on something like this, I would say it's a 6, and maybe a low 6 at that. It burns brightest in the beginning and then fizzles out the longer you watch. For a series that is built on the back of dungeon exploration and action, it certainly doesn't do very well at portraying that action or making it super appealing. There are a few moments that do look decent, but they're hardly a drop in the bucket of the total animation. and the most entertainment I got out of the powers was whenever Yuke would use that spell that made his target slip on a banana peel. I effectively found myself bored of this show by the time it was reaching about its 2/3 mark. I don't really want more after what I have seen. I'm content to not return to this ever, but to each their own. There were quite a bit of people who were excited about this. And if you love this series, I'm glad for you. Hope you enjoy season 2, but I have no intention of watching anymore after everything that I've seen from this.